All right, guys. So this time I'm going to be just introducing some new, content to you guys. I feel better doing it over recording because I feel I can get my point across more. So I'm just going to get straight into it. 5 things to consider when trying to lose weight. Now, it's the start of the year. It's normally people's goals to lose, some body fat and some unwanted chubby bits, normally like around midsection, around the face, I just went over these 5 things here just to make sure that you are just considering these before you jump straight into being like, all right, I'm going to lose all this body fat and weight this year, and I'm going to be at this this body weight by this particular date, etc. So the first one is, are you mentally prepared? When losing body fat, right? It's normally one of the hardest things. It's harder than, in my opinion, and with coaching people and trying to help them to lose body fat and change their body composition, is them being mentally prepared. And what I mean by that is, one, they've got to understand all of the components that come into losing body fat. It is, as much as the industry wants to tell you, just be in a calorie deficit. If you've tried to lose weight before, that is not just the case. That is not the only thing that helps you. And making sure that your lifestyle is set up in a way that encourages you to lose weight. And what I mean by that is making sure you're not super stressed in life at the moment. That's what I find. Because if you're already super stressed, work's giving you a headache, or you've just had this, big moment in your life, partner's left you, someone died, whatever. Trying to then put the pressure on yourself of going into like a calorie deficit, reducing the amount of food that you're going to eat, your energy levels are going to drop from there, which means your focus might drop, your sleep can be affected, your mood can then be affected. And it becomes, that little snowball becomes a big snowball kind of thing. Just making sure that you're looking at your life as a whole and going, can I commit to tracking my calories, watching what I am eating and drinking, making sure that, I'm keeping up with my steps throughout the day. And if I start to feel any changes, or am I expecting this big thing, looking forward in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months down the line, probably not that far actually, 2 weeks to 2 months, looking forward and going, am I expecting anything big that's going to cause me some unwanted stress and pressure and maybe take some time away from me working on myself? Just look at those aspects of your life, and if you're ticking boxes and going, no, do you know what? I'm ready for this mentally. I've looked at my life, and there's nothing big that's going on at the moment. I don't have any huge work commitments or anything like that. Then I think that that's step 1, and when considering it. Step 2: have you set a goal or a time frame? Understand this. This is what I tell people when they're trying to lose weight. A fat loss phase is just a phase in time or in your life. You don't want to be constantly living your life in a fat loss phase or in a calorie deficit, right? It is not enjoyable. And that's where a lot of people go wrong and they fall off the bandwagon, because they set a date and they set a goal or a time frame, but they've set it for like 12 months. And in their head, that means that they have to be in this calorie deficit for 12 months straight or 6 months straight. And it doesn't quite work like that. It's hard being in a calorie deficit. A lot of things change in your body, which, you didn't expect until it's right there at your doorstep. Things like higher levels of fatigue, lower levels of focus. When you go out to, a work dinner or out with your partner, you have to be more conscious of what you're eating. You can't just stuff your face, because it takes away from that end goal. So making sure that you've set a goal and a time frame that you are going to be in this calorie deficit for. Normally it's obviously out of the Christmas period, because for most people, 95+% of people, they like to have a drink and they like to go out for dinners and that. That's why it's good looking at your lifestyle and saying, okay, over the next 5 weeks, which is what I use with all my nutrition clients, 4 weeks of like hard deficit dieting with a week of maintenance, looking at that next 5 weeks and going, what do I have on? What it could be potentially disrupting it? And can I move it out of the way now so that I can, use these next 5 weeks to really drop some body fat and some body weight and get momentum going. But making sure that you've set a time frame for how long you're going to be in it. That's why I normally like to say to people, let's just look at the next 5 weeks, and in the next 5 weeks, let's achieve X or Y. After that, or the third thing is, do you know your triggers? plenty of things. I know my triggers. Stress leads to drinking. So I want to make sure, again, this is where I go back to step one. What stresses do I have in my life at the moment? Am I constantly fucking stressed? Then I'm probably not going to want it. Like a calorie deficit is probably just going to add more stress to that. But if I'm pretty good in life at the moment, that's like, for me personally, when I came back from New Zealand, I wasn't overly stressed, but I was out of shape. But I looked at my life and I went, I haven't really got much going on. I'm kind of winding down now between now and the end of the year. I've actually removed some stress from my life, and that was like, bringing in some extra coaches and some extra help to help, deal with that and being quite time poor. And I went, okay, I realized that stress is a big one for me. It's normally a big one for everyone. I've reduced that. I'm probably, on point now to, or at a great time to, go into a calorie deficit and start losing some body fat. And I set myself a goal. I like to set it in 5 weekly, installments in that sense. And it took me about 9 weeks, and I completely changed the way I look. And I put a photo of that up. I'll probably put it in here if I can edit it in. But I know what my triggers are. My two main ones, they don't have to be fucking heaps of triggers, because then we know how just fucked up we are. Those were my two triggers. So I made sure that I reduced my stress so that I would reduce my alcohol intake, and then when I did like to drink alcohol, I would be on the low calorie beers of like 97 calories per beer, and I would only allow myself to, when I did have a drink, only allow myself to have 3 of those. So understanding what your triggers are. Yours might be food, when you get stressed or you get emotional, you go to emotional eating. Just making sure that you are aware of those things. So when you do get stressed, because chances are you are going to get stressed or something's going to go on. Normally it's stress that causes people to fall off the bandwagon, or you're overwhelmed, or you're anxious, or you just have this big thing in life. Knowing what those triggers are, so then when it happens, trying to change that trigger, trying to change that habit, right? It might still be close to that trigger, but enough away that you can still make progress. Like I say, for me, instead of having fucking, hard ciders and 6 of those every time, almost like every night of the week, I've now just swapped it to low carb beers, and I've limited my amount that I could have. And the proof's in the pudding. I completely changed the way I look using that formula. Number 4, have you thought about tracking? So again, going back to your triggers, does standing on the scale, a form of tracking how you're going, cause you to go into overwhelming anxiety, especially if you don't see that scale weight constantly going down, or if you have it goes down and then one night it goes up because you went out to dinner and you had some more carbs and some more sodium. You're feeling heavier and there's a lot more water in your body, and you see that weight scale go up and you're just triggered and you're like, fuck this, I'm out, done, it's not working, right? Thinking about how you're going to track. So the weight on the scales might mean you just do it once a week. You might be like me, where you just see the weight on the scale as a number, and I can weigh myself every day, and I can make logical decisions and really look at my lifestyle. It doesn't trigger me, right? But you might be someone who benefits more from getting a DEXA scan every 5 weeks. You might track every 5 weeks, or you might be someone who takes progress photos every week. You might be someone who takes body circumferences, maybe once a week, and you're tracking it from there. But you just got to think about how you're going to track, as well as what are you tracking? Are you going to track your calories every single day? Or are you going to, know what your calories should be? You're going to write out of what a day could look like to stick into those calories, and you're just going to eat that same thing, or you're just going to, loosely follow it, just to make sure that what you're doing is working. Are you going to track how many steps you're doing? Are you going to track your sleep? Are you going to track your hydration? Are you going to track your steps? I can see quite overwhelming. You're like, fuck, before I even get started, this is too much for me. I like to use the habit tracker. It's got everything in it, and it takes about like 30 seconds a day. And you can use like MyFitnessPal as well to use your calories. Those are the 2 things that I use. Everything which I just mentioned is within those 2 things. But you just got to consider what you're going to track and how often you're going to track it. And if any of those are triggering to you, you do them less and you find out things to do more, right? And then the final one, number 5, will you make this long term? Okay, that is terribly written. I'm going to change that when I pop that on screen. How will you make this long term? Or have you considered how you will make this long term? Because like I say, a fat loss phase is something that you should just do within in a time frame. It should be a phase in your life, right? Shouldn't be your whole life. I'm sweating thinking about it. But considering what will happen after this fat loss phase, like once you've reached your goal, have you have you spent time not just in a calorie deficit, but understanding how you can maintain this whilst changing your lifestyle afterwards? Because there are things that you're going to have to sacrifice when you're in a fat loss phase, right? But then, let's say you've done it for 6 months and you've achieved what you wanted to. You're at a body weight that you're happy with now. You look in the mirror, you're like, fuck, I look great. How will you make that long term? What habits are you going to put in place to make sure that this is going to work long term? That is what I'd really like people to consider. And for myself, with like the fat loss phase that I use with myself and my lifters, is during those phases, giving yourself the opportunity to eat in maintenance so that when you do put your calories back up, you don't fucking binge and indulge and you kind of know what your calories look like. Making sure you're learning, like for myself now, I can look at a portion on my plate and, kind of have an idea of how much carbs and fats and proteins that I have on my plate and what my plate should look like. When I go out for dinner, looking at these things and being able to like carb load and, know, all right, I'm in a calorie deficit at the moment, or I'm completely out of my calorie deficit. I'm living my life how I want to, but when I go out for dinner, I know I need to consider X and Y. I know that if I'm drinking, a bottle of wine a night, I'm probably going to put that weight back on. So I need to make sure that I'm limiting that. Just be considering what your life is going to look like after this phase of dieting, so that you don't become a yo-yo dieter and then lose all this weight and then come out and fucking put on all the weight again and drop back into it. It's just not a life you want to live. It sounds shit, let's be honest. So those are the 5 things that I want you to consider before going into a calorie deficit. I will do one on muscle gain as well, like building muscle, etc. But that's just a couple of things that you want to consider. If you have any questions, hit me up, link in the bio, or if this is in my group page, just comment on here if you need to sit down and talk about it. If you want to start jumping on more of a I wouldn't say regimen. If you want some coaching with your nutrition, got myself and Big Jack and our 20-week kind of program where we teach all of this. We go through how to make it long term, knowing what to track. We will check first of all if your mentally and lifestyle is ready to go into a calorie deficit and commit to this project, looking at how you're going to track it, understand what your triggers are. There's a lot of information. There's a big conversation to be had about it. To make sure that you are ready to do this and you're not just going to jump in and then feel like a failure if you don't do it. So that's me. Those are the 5 things you want to mentally or question yourself about before you jump into a calorie deficit, and I'll speak to you soon.